I have a friend who watches our show, and I just wanted to tell you about this because I want to get your thoughts on it. He's very intelligent, and he's a liberal or progressive. I'm not sure how he defines himself, but he's on the left, and he definitely sees the danger of social justice ideology. He's aware of it. He watches our show because it concerns him. He is voting Democrat because for him, he believes the global warming stuff, that humans role in it, and he believes the. I don't have an opinion, by the way, if anyone's wondering. Global warming is such a big topic, and it's something we've wanted to look at for a while now, but it's going to take a lot of time because I'm going to have to read a lot. So I definitely believe climate change is real. It's just I don't know how much of a role man plays in it, and I don't know how much control government, like giving government more control over things, would help anyway. But he anyway, he's voting Democrat because of the environment and because of global warming. That is his
Right.
big thing. But so we were talking about that tweet from Sean Lennon where he said
Mm.
it is not an exaggeration to say that the collusion between legacy media and big social is at a, to manipulate the public, the American public, for the political outcome that they want, to try and drive their desired political outcome. It is not exaggerated to say that it has reached Stalinist proportions.
Right.
And in fact, it might be worse than during Stalin's time because Stalin didn't have social media technology. Just imagine, would we even have an accurate reporting of that history if he had had social media technology? So my friend took issue with this and was saying that it was hyperbole because there's no way it's nowhere close to Stalinist proportions because Stalin was, putting people in gulags and death camps. And I said, wait a minute, we're talking
He's
about two
talking
different
about two
things.
different things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, two different things. It's nobody's saying this is we're at that point of putting people in work camps or gulags yet we could be, and I'm not even saying we're inevitably headed there. I don't know what the future holds. What Sean Lennon was saying is that the the apparatus which currently exists in the US to push propaganda, to censor real news and truth, and to mass manipulate the public is on a level of Stalin's propaganda machine, and arguably is even worse because of social media. We have these gadgets in our hand. We carry them around everywhere with us that you rightly pointed out, Carter, track everything we think and do and who we associate with and what we buy and everything about us. Imagine, and Sean Lennon was inviting us to imagine what it could have been like if Stalin had had that technology. How much more successful would the propaganda and the mass control of people have been? It is not hyperbole. That apparatus is at Stalinist proportions. And he also seemed to be hung up on the fact that, well, from his point of view, well, this is happening it is happening, but it's big social and it's legacy media doing it. It's not the government. And my point is that your distinction between the apparatus that's doing it, well, it's different if it's the government doing it versus big social and legacy media. Your distinction doesn't matter when it comes to the effect. I don't care who is behind the mass manipulation of American people and the propaganda machine that we're currently suffering under, that this alternate reality. I don't care who's creating the false reality. The fact is, it is on a massive scale and it's being created, and the effect is the same if it were the government versus legacy media and big social. Nobody's arguing with you about the differences between those two types of censorship, that one is protected and one's not. The private ones by private companies is protected and the other's not. Nobody's arguing about that. We could get into the details on that and argue about Section 230 and stuff, but I don't care to do that. The point is, I'm talking about the effect on the American people is the same. And you're ignoring the fact that deep state, our intelligence agencies, our military industrial complex, they work in collusion with legacy media and big social to pull off this propaganda. They push the stories. That documentary, The Plot Against the President, I didn't need to watch that to understand this feedback loop, but if you do need something to illustrate it for you and show exactly how it works, it shows how the FBI and the CIA plant stories in the press, and then they use those stories to get the justification for FISA warrants and things, that whatever action it is they want to take, they use the stories that they create to then be able to carry out the
evidence
actions.
for the stuff they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yes. And so all of this to say, when I started talking about how they do work in collusion with the government and with deep state, he said, well, I don't believe in a deep state conspiracy. And so I tried to get him to clarify. I was like, do you mean you don't believe in deep state itself, or a deep state quote conspiracy? Because deep state is just a phrase that we use to refer to unelected government officials, like in the intelligence agencies, like in the military agencies. That's all that means. And so if you don't believe in deep state, do you believe, for example, that Epstein killed himself? Do you believe that Oswald
You had to bring it back to Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, because I asked him, I said, do you believe that Oswald was a lone gunman and just a nut job who killed Kennedy? Do you believe that? And he said, well, I don't know enough about the Kennedy assassination. Okay, well, let's take something current. Do you believe Epstein killed himself? I'm saying all this to you, Carter, because
I don't.
Deep
Go ahead.
Deep state is something that the left, we used to talk about and criticize. We talked about it. We talked about,
The deep state is unfortunately labeled because it sounds like a crazy Mel Gibson movie, right? It sounds like there's some kind of, it's the deep state, and there's, or the an X-Files thing, like this smoking man's in a room with some other people, and they're, consorting with aliens or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The deep state...
It's not that.
No, the deep state is just the massive bureaucracy which has an agenda of its own. And if I don't think any reasonably intelligent, rational person can deny that there is a bureaucracy that has its own agenda. And that agenda is to grow in power and control. It's very clear, right? It's how budgets work. I mean, you don't spend all your money this year, you don't get as much next year. You got to spend all your money. It's just very, very simple things, right? You've got you set up an agency to solve a problem. Well, you better never solve it, or you're all going to lose your jobs, right? Like the deep state is a massive bureaucracy with its own agenda, and it doesn't mean there's a smoky room filled with old guys with cigars making plans. Although there could be sometimes, I don't know. But it doesn't mean there's a massive coordinated campaign. It just means the deep state has its own agenda. It has its own things that you want to do. And you don't have to be on the left or on the right to think of this as coherent with your viewpoint. Plenty of leftists throughout history have complained about the deep state. There's plenty of complaints about nefarious activities that the CIA has been involved in, both inside this country and outside this country. And that's kind of the most dramatic, obvious Hollywood type stuff. But there's also just less dramatic stuff, like a bureaucrat in the EPA opposing something because it would shut down his little pet project and blah, blah, blah. That's the deep state. The deep state has an agenda. The deep state has its agenda. And so I don't see how anyone who is rational and awake can really say there isn't a deep state. Clearly, there's a deep state. If there wasn't a deep state, I would be very happy because there would be no budget for the deep state. So if the classical liberals or the libertarians, people who want small government, the minarchists, when they're in control completely, then you will see no deep state. Because there will only be a limited government activities. But as soon as there's all this government activity, there is a deep state by definition. And, these are the same leftists who were very excited about the concept of a military-industrial complex and probably still believe that. This guy probably is all about Cheney and Halliburton and the Bushes and the oil and wars for oil and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's the deep state. That is the other part of that's all related. That's all related.
It's actually, I'm very glad we're reading Management of Savagery next, because I think it's going to get into some of this stuff about the intelligence agencies and about our continual intervention in the Middle East And, for people who, I guess I was just curious what your take on was on people who I guess think there's no deep state. And part of the problem, like
I mean,
you're
I
saying,
worked for the
is
deep state. Don't tell me there's no deep state, right?
yeah,
And I
part
know
of the
some people in
problem,
chat did.
yeah, it's part of the problem, I guess, is the unfortunate naming and in that it causes people to conjure some X-Files kind of, yeah, like you said, smoky room with lizard people and whatever, like all this crazy
Right,
stuff. And that's
right,
not what it is. It's just unelected government officials who,
right. And
yeah,
it is often very incompetent. That is true. The deep state isn't like, it's power through numbers, but not competence. The deep
yeah,
state isn't necessarily like massively competent at manipulating stuff. There's just a lot of them. And it's got a lot of power. And, you know, they often are, they can be very incompetent. Ask Keith the Hack Guy in chat. Um, so, and they've got their
and
agendas, right?
and I guess I would also say, and I didn't bring this up with my friend yet, but for anyone who is not familiar with it, read about Operation Mockingbird and the CIA. Read about
Operation
Operation
Paperclip.
Paperclip.
Yeah.
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 Even in the Kennedy files that Trump did open up, I don't know if people remember this. It barely made a blip in the news, but he did release some Kennedy documents, and in those, I thought the most interesting one was the one that showed how the CIA had plans to set off a bomb in an
Oh,
American
right.
city in Florida. They were going to set off a bomb and blame it on Castro.
Well, the
And
1993 World Trade Center bombing, the guy who was in the FBI informant, he took the bomb to the FBI. He said to the FBI, "We're building a bomb," because he was the informant for this quote terrorist cell, whatever. I assume you want me to build it with like real parts. You want me to build an inert bomb, right? You know what the FBI said? No, no, no. Use real stuff. Like, okay. Then it blew up. Thank you,
yeah,
FBI.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Keith in chat says, "Ha! I confirm the deep state exists and is often incompetent."
I knew he would confirm both of those facts.